I thought my backyard was finally my own private space. Then, my neighbor started building something that made no sense. At first, I assumed there had been some kind of misunderstanding. I had no idea what was about to happen. The first thing I noticed was the construction equipment. They weren't working on his side of the fence. They were working dangerously close to my property line. So I decided to find out exactly what was going on. I walked over and asked him what he was building. He smiled like everything was completely normal. He told me it was going to be his new backyard pool. But there was one problem with that answer. I looked down at the markings and immediately noticed something strange. The pool outline seemed to cross the boundary between our properties. I asked him if he had checked the property lines. His answer made me even more suspicious. He laughed and told me I was worrying about nothing. According to him, the boundary was somewhere farther back. He said the pool had already been planned and approved, but I wasn't convinced. That evening, I went through every document I had. I checked the original purchase records for my property. I wanted to know exactly where my land ended, and what I found made me take the situation seriously. The documents showed a clear boundary line. It ran much closer to my neighbor's house than he claimed. I started comparing that line with the location of his pool. The two simply didn't match. The next morning, I went outside and measured the area myself. I didn't want to accuse anyone without knowing the facts. Every measurement pointed in the same direction. The construction was getting dangerously close to my land. I showed him the measurements and asked him to stop the work temporarily. He didn't seem interested in discussing it. Instead, he insisted that everything had already been checked. That was when I realized this wasn't going to be a simple conversation. Despite my concerns, construction continued. The hole for the pool became larger every day. My neighbor seemed more confident with every shovel of dirt. I decided not to argue anymore. Days passed, and the pool was almost finished. My neighbor looked incredibly proud of what he had built. He seemed certain that nobody could challenge him now. But I had already made a decision. Instead of arguing with my neighbor, I contacted a professional. I wanted the property boundary verified officially. If I was right, I wanted proof that couldn't be dismissed. So I ordered a professional property survey. The surveyor arrived early the next morning. He carefully checked the existing markers and measurements. My neighbor noticed the equipment almost immediately. For the first time, I saw uncertainty on his face. The surveyor spent hours checking the exact boundary. He measured from several different reference points. Then he placed markers along the true property line. The results were impossible to misunderstand. The survey confirmed what I had suspected from the beginning. A portion of the pool had been built over my property boundary. I didn't need to shout or threaten anyone. I finally had official proof in my hands. I walked over while he was relaxing beside his new pool. He looked at me and smiled, expecting another argument. Instead, I handed him the survey. Then I waited for him to read it. He read the boundary line once. Then he read it again. His confident smile disappeared almost instantly. He finally understood why I had been so calm. The survey showed exactly where his pool crossed onto my property. He had spent thousands of dollars building it there. Now the situation was completely different, and I was the one holding the evidence. I wasn't interested in humiliating my neighbor. I simply wanted him to understand that my property was not his to use. The survey gave us a clear starting point for resolving everything. And suddenly, that expensive pool wasn't looking so relaxing. My neighbor had spent $25,000 building his dream pool. He thought the project was completely on his property, but the survey told a very different story. And that was only the beginning of what happened next.